when you realize that people are dumber than bricks, all you have to do is track what people do, and you will know exactly what to do and when to do it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zara Sethna, and this is the Collapse Life podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. So, the global financial reckoning feels like it is arriving and bringing with it a lot of chaos and a lot of questions. To help us unpack what's really happening, I'm very pleased to be joined by Bob Moriarty, founder of 321 Gold. We wanted to focus our conversation today exclusively on the dying economic system, but Bob suggested there's something even larger unfolding, something many so called experts don't yet acknowledge. So that's where we'll begin today. And Bob, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us from the south of France.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
It's wonderful to have you here. And as we said just before we started, there is a lot going on. I wanted to ask you, so you have lived through many boom and bust periods before, you've lived through wars before. What would you say feels different now compared to past crises?
This is worse. Okay, I was a 16-year-old child going through high school in Fort Worth at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And we were well aware of how close we were to World War III. We are far closer today. I went through the boom and bust of the late 60s, of 2000, the 2008 crisis, the 2015 crash in gold and silver. So, all of these things I've seen before, and the difference is it's far worse now. And what scares me the most is most people are oblivious to it.
Yeah. That is very scary, and it's actually one of the things you kind of pointed out because you did say this moment is bigger than most experts even understand. So, what would you say is the main thing that ordinary people are not being told?
Well, the strange thing is they are being told. They're just oblivious to it.
Mm,
It's amazing to me. If you go back to 1962, the American people were well aware that we were in an extremely dangerous period of time. And it was on television, it was in the newspaper, it was on the radio, and people talked about it. Today, we are far closer to World War III, yet you hear nothing about it on the mainstream media. To the extent that we have access to far more information today that we have ever had before, the vast majority of people ignore the data and they listen to the mainstream media.
yeah.
And I say, and I think that's accurate, 100% of what the mainstream media tells you is an outright lie.
For sure. 100% agree with that. Just on that note, we wrote recently about how Americans are responding to these record high gold prices. And it was the New York Times front page story on Sunday last week that they're turning out to the Diamond District in Midtown Manhattan to sell gold, actually, to sell the necklaces and bracelets and tie clips that they were given across their life because prices are high. And the New York Times kind of framed this is a very rational response. When prices are high, you sell. When prices are low, you buy. And really kind of implicitly, not explicitly, suggested a very American perspective on gold, which is it's not real money. It's not a store of wealth. It's just this purview of crazy tinfoil hat people. Whereas in European media, we're reading about how there are also lines forming in front of bullion dealers, but that's people buying in spite of the record high prices because they understand the precarious nature of the time that we're in. And even though prices are higher than they have been, they want in and they think that prices may go higher. So there's just a really different, not only a cultural outlook, but also the way the media narrative is portrayed in Europe versus America around this. But it is an indicator that the gold prices are seeping through to people's consciousness. I just think that people are interpreting what that means a little bit differently. What are your thoughts?
Well, actually, I don't think they're interpreting it differently. In 1979 and 1980, I was living in Pennsylvania in Bucks County, and there was a proliferation of little mom and pop gold and silver shops that just sprung up over a 6 week period. And I remember going to one, and there were two lines. There was a very short line of people that were looking to sell, and there was a very long line of people that were looking to buy. And one of the things that I do, if you paid attention to my interviews, is ask kind of trick questions that force you into thinking. So, my trick question to start off the interview with is, the people who are in the line to sell gold and silver, how many of them were doing it at a profit?
Well, from the examples given in the New York Times, they were selling off necklaces and bracelets that were given to them in the 1970s, or at a time when gold price was maybe $35 an ounce. So it's hard to see it as a profit because these are things that they have had that maybe they didn't even buy. They're just kind
Okay,
of
let me stop
okay.
you right there. That is a US $20 gold piece.
Okay.
And when gold was $20.67 an ounce, this had exactly $20 worth of gold. And then it was raised $35 an ounce in 1933. Now, the first gold I ever bought would have been something like this,
Hmm.
and I would have paid 36 or $37 an ounce. To go from $35 an ounce to 4,400, what is the multiple?
It's like 120,000. I didn't even know, to be honest.
Actually, you're coming real close, and that was a really trick question. It's 125 times higher.
Right.
Now, I talk about the price of gold and the price of silver, and I compare it to postage stamps, to automobiles, to houses, to trophy wives, to milk, to bread.
Mhm.
What in your life has gone up 125 times that it's a real asset? I'm not talking about Bitcoin because
Right.
I don't consider it a real asset. But name anything that you grew up with that is 125 times higher now.
I mean, nothing.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now, silver was $1.29 when gold was $35 an ounce. And silver's only gone up about 40-fold. Okay. When I was a kid, a Mars or a Snickers bar cost 5 cents. Today it costs 50 cents. When I was
Mhm.
really young, a Coca Cola cost 5 cents and now it costs $2. So that's up 40-fold. Nothing has gone up as much as gold. So the
Right.
one thing that you can say is all of the people who were selling gold in New York at 125 times the price of what it was 50 years ago, all of those people have made money. So let's talk about the people in Europe who are buying gold because there's a big tax on silver here. So nobody buys silver, everybody buys gold.
Mm.
How many of those people are making a profit?
I mean, it's hard to answer that.
No, it's easy. None of them. they're buying at an all-time high. Okay, uh, what are the odds that any particular investment will go up tomorrow? Anything at all, gold, silver, IBM stock, automobiles, anything. What are the two things that investments can do? They
They
go
could go
up
up or down.
or they go down. So the
50-50.
odds of something changing are exactly 50-50. Gold went up 9 weeks in a row. Now, 9 weeks in a row is 2 to the 8th power, or 512 times. Okay, so it would take 512 weeks before you could expect to run into exactly the same situation again. That's like
Mhm.
once every 10 years.
Mhm.
So people who are selling gold and selling silver are very rational. People who are buying gold or buying silver are not necessarily rational.
But
Uh,
they're selling their gold for US dollars, which are devaluing very rapidly, aren't they? So I mean, is it really better to have a $10 bill or have a gold necklace?
well, strange enough, okay. What are the two alternatives? If you buy something, what are the two things that can happen to you?
Tell me.
They go up or
They go down.
they go down.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so if you don't sell at a profit, what is the only other alternative?
If you don't sell at a profit.
Yeah. Okay,
So
you
if
you you, you buy something, anything,
yeah,
and then you sell it. Now,
at a
you can
loss.
either sell it at a profit or you sell it at a loss. If you don't sell it at a profit, what's the only thing that can happen?
Well, I guess the price of the thing you just sold could go up.
Now it goes down. If you don't sell it at a profit, you have to sell it at a loss. And
So
that's
it's
what
already gone
people
down, right?
forget. And one of the things I'm a contrarian. I follow sentiment. I have no idea of what gold or silver or automobiles or trophy wives or the loaf of bread is going to do tomorrow. I'm not that smart. However, I can follow what people are doing. When gold goes up 9 weeks in a row, it's an extraordinary amount of bullishness, and a typical investment would go down after that point. If you go back to the year 2000, when the stock market, the S&P, no, the Nasdaq hit high, it was up 19 days in a row. Now that's 2 to the 18th power, and my mental calculator can't even work out how high that is, but it was extremely obvious to me we were at a peak of sentiment. Now,
Mhm.
sentiment is the only thing that moves the price of any commodity. People are either bullish or they're bearish. Now, the people in Europe are bullish, but they're in Europe. France is bankrupt, the UK is bankrupt, Germany is bankrupt. One of the things I hope we mentioned, did you see what Trump did with oil today?
I did not. I haven't had a chance. It's early in the morning
Okay,
for me.
he's increased tariffs on Russia.
Mm.
There have been 19 sets of tariffs, every one of which failed. So now we're up to 20 sets of tariffs. I wonder what will happen if 19 sets of tariffs fail. What are the odds that the 20th will succeed?
Yeah.
Oh, it's exactly zero.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that the actions of the people in New York are rational people, and the actions of the people in Europe are not necessarily rational. Now, I don't believe for a moment gold is at the highest it's ever going to be.
Right.
However, I do believe it's signaling people are too bullish.
Mhm. So But I understand that that is a rational move, certainly in normal times. We're not necessarily in normal times, but do you not think, in terms of sentiment, that the people who are actually buying gold are indicating that they have less trust in the system, in the government, in the economy overall, and therefore they would rather have a tangible store of wealth than cash, which could devalue or hyperinflate?
Well, yes, that's true. But if someone was buying gold at $252 in 1999 and they were buying it at $4,400 last Monday, which one is the most rational?
For sure, for sure. But it seems like a sign of panic in a way then to go and buy when things are high. But that I really feel like that's just them sort of signaling that, like, I know I should have bought it before when things were lower, but I'm still gonna buy it now in spite of the fact that it's high because things are gonna get worse.
Yeah, whatever you do, never buy anything at the low. Wait until it's hitting an all-time high, and it's 125 times higher what you could have paid. Here's the problem: man is a herd animal, just like a school of fish or a flock of birds. If you ever watched uh, I'm trying to think of where you are, and I'm certain you would have had geese or you would have had ducks when you were in Canada. You're watching a formation of 200 ducks or 15 geese. How do these guys know how to go back and forth in formation? What
Right.
signal are they giving that they're all flying in the same direction at the same time rather than going like this? Okay.
Mhm.
And the fact is that we're herd animals. We want to be with the herd because that's how you're going to be safe. But the
Mhm.
problem is with investing, it is exactly the opposite of that. When everybody wants to buy, you want to sell. When everybody wants to sell, you want to buy. It is totally contrary, but it's contrarians who make money. The very best book that uh, ever was written about investing was Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. Now, we were talking earlier, you're going to like this. We were talking earlier about being in Texas. Uh, I went into the Marine Corps a week after I turned 18 and I became a fighter pilot. And I was in the Marine Corps for 6 years. And then I got out when I was 24 years old. My parents said, you know, if you're going to succeed in life, you have to go to college. So I went to the University of Texas and it was kind of and I went to Southern Methodist and it was kind of Then I went to Columbia and it was kind of and I realized they're all about the same. But Southern Methodist had a core curriculum that was required, and it was the best core curriculum of any college that I went to, and I went to 5 different colleges. And one of the things you had to study was Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. And it
Amazing.
was a book written around 1850 and it was about 30 chapters about the stupidity of people. They had the tulip bulb craze in there, and
Mhm.
they had the Crusades in there, and they had a story about one of the Tsars of Russia. If you had a beard, they would hang you. And the next czar of Russia, if you didn't have a beard, they would hang you. And the year 1000, okay, where all of the Christians were absolutely convinced that Messiah was coming back, and everybody stopped everything for the year 1000. And you read story after story after story of how stupid people are in crowd behavior.
Mhm.
And when you realize that people are dumber than bricks, all you have to do is track what people do, and you will know exactly what to do and when to do it. if you can measure sentiment accurately, and there's 50 different ways of measuring, if you can measure sentiment accurately, I couldn't predict what the price of gold is going to be a week from now. I'm not smart enough. I can't tell you what it'll be a month from now. Do I believe that it will go higher? Yes, but it will go higher after the bullish sentiment goes down a lot. People are too bullish right now.
Mhm.
I'll give you the really bad news. And I've written a couple of financial books. And one of the things that I say is if anybody says this time is different, don't walk to the exit, run,
Hmm.
because it's never different. And unfortunately, I will almost suggest that maybe I have to revise the book, because if gold keeps going up from here, it is a sign of the end of the financial world. And
Mhm.
perhaps this time is different. I don't believe that it is. I predicted a week ago that we were at a top and we were going to have a correction, and we've started a correction. And even though gold and silver are up today, I think we're in a correction for the next month or two.
Right. What is different though is everything that's happening around and connected to the financial system. And this brings us to this essay that you sent us in advance of our conversation by the French author Emmanuel Todd, which you recommended that we read, and we did read with interest. His basic argument is that the West is now kind of post victory, post morality, post reality. Um, do you agree with what his assessment is, and how does that connect in with what's happening and whether this time is different?
Uh, that's a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up. Uh, I read that and I sent it to you because Emmanuel Todd is saying exactly the same thing that I've been saying for years. And this is something 90% of financial commentators totally miss. Now, he's
Hmm.
written a book, it's only available in French, but there are some excerpts from it called The Defeat of the West. And he said the debt based system of the West is in a state of collapse. And I've said for years, okay, that's really obvious. If you look at it, you can compare the West, and I'm going to include Australia, Canada, the United States, Europe in being the debt based system of the West. It's a direct analogy of Rome in the years 300 and 400. They had real leaders and real leaderships, and they were good people in the republic, and then it became an empire, and then it went into total corruption. We have total corruption now. You
Hmm.
talk about the Republicans and the Democrats, and it's easy to criticize Trump, but it was just as easy to criticize Biden. And the political system of the United States is one snake with two heads.
Hmm.
If you look at the political system of Europe, it's an utter disaster. They signed up for the 19 sets of sanctions against Russia, and they destroyed their economy. Uh, Trump likes the head of Argentina, and he has committed either 20 billion or 40 billion dollars in funds to Argentina
Right.
because they're in trouble. But the UK wants to go to the IMF, and Germany wants to go to the IMF, and France wants to go to the IMF. And the problem is there's not enough printing presses in the entire world to bail Europe out. And if you look at the quality of leadership in Europe, it's total insanity. They keep talking about how they're going to defeat Russia. Excuse me, this Russia we're talking about, like Napoleon, who was one of the greatest military commanders of all time, marched in with 200,000 troops and he marched out with 20,000. Or Hitler, okay, who actually was pretty good from a military point of view. We're going to have Donald Trump. Do you remember what Donald Trump's military background was?
Yes.
He was in ROTC in high school. And Donald Trump and George Bush and I share something in common. We were born within 6 weeks of each other. So I know exactly what these guys went through in terms of being eligible for the draft. George Bush Jr., the shrub, graduated from high school the same year I did in Texas. He was in Lubbock. I was in Fort Worth, 1964. I went into the Marine Corps and became a fighter pilot. He went to Yale.
Yeah.
And then when he got out of Yale in 1968, when he wasn't going down to Mexico to snort coke, he got accepted into Air Force flight training. I went to Vietnam.
Yeah.
Okay. So he decided he didn't really want to go to Vietnam. And Donald Trump got Daddy to buy off a doctor to tell him that he had bone spurs that he's never had before and never had since. These guys were draft dodgers. Bill
Right.
Clinton, same thing, was a draft dodger. I am not saying that being in the military or fighting a war is a good thing, but it is an experience. And unfortunately, all of these guys who are draft dodgers want to be armchair generals.
Hmm.
And Donald Trump is at war with everybody. He's at war with Mexico. He's at war with Canada. He's at
Right.
war with Europe. Now he's at war with Colombia. He's at war with Venezuela. He's at war with Gaza. He's at war with the West Bank. He's at war with Iran. Wait a minute.
Right.
You don't want to fight everybody. So we live in very precarious time. Sentiment moves market. If you can measure sentiment, when everybody's bullish, you want to get out. When everybody's bearish, you want to get back in. You want to do exactly the opposite of what the herd is doing.
Yeah. The idea that we're at war or at the brink of war at very least with all of those different states that you just mentioned. We've now rebranded the Department of War. This is a president who desperately wants a Nobel Peace Prize, even though all of those things you just mentioned. At the same time as it's pretty undeniable, as you state, that the debt-based system is collapsing, and that was happening even before Donald Trump became president. What is going on there? Is that purposeful? Is it an effort to try and detract or distract from everything else that's happening? What is the impetus to start all these unnecessary wars?
Well, strange enough, and that's a very good way of putting it. Let's go back to the last time we had a shift economically, like the shift that we're going through. There is a conflict. Emmanuel Todd recognizes it, and the conflict is between the debt based system of the West and the resource based system of the South and the East. BRICS was not founded to be anti the dollar. It was founded to protect their countries
Right.
from the corruption in the dollar. But you have to go back to 1492. Now, Columbus was not the first European who discovered North America. Okay, the Vikings were here in the year 1000. Okay,
Right.
the Portuguese fishermen were fishing off the Grand Banks, literally from the 12th, 13th, 14th century. So Columbus didn't discover North America. However, what he did was open it up for plundering from Europe. And it took about, let's see, he discovered the Bahamas in 1492. It took until about 1520 or 1522 to the Spanish start making major silver and gold discoveries in Brazil for the Portuguese, in Colombia, in Bolivia, in Peru. And so much money flowed into Europe that the economic power all shifted from the East to the West. And now we're in a situation where it's shifting back to the East. Uh,
Mm.
Somebody said something to me talking about the power of India and China and pointed out to me that 18 out of the last 20 centuries, those were the two economic powers in the world. They're so large and they're so intelligent, hardworking people. They have to be at the top of the heap. But because of the debt based system of the West, we've had a lot of power in the West. But the banks have increased the debt again and again and again and again. And the banks actually want the financial system to collapse. There's a good book called The Great Taking. And
Yeah.
in the United States, they plan on seizing all the assets. And that goes back to the World Economic Forum. In 2030, you will own nothing and you will owe nothing
And
and
be
you'll
happy.
be happy. And of
Mm.
course, that's the definition of slavery.
Right. It's it's just everything you're saying is things that we have thought about, and it's the reason why we started Collapse Life is that we saw that the system that has propelled the West for the past few decades is changing inevitably, and we are positioned to sort of question why it's happening, what's happening, help people understand it, and talk about what comes next because um, collapse of civilization has happened time and time again. Mankind doesn't go away. We just come in some new form. So that was one question I wanted to ask you. If you and Emmanuel Todd agree that basically the defeat of the West is already here, um, is there any path to kind of a rebirth, or do we first enter a dark stage of kind of dislocation, moral turpitude? What does the next phase look like to you?
Okay, what was the phase after the demise of the Roman Empire? What did we call that period?
The Dark Ages.
Thank you. Okay, ask me your question again.
I think you just answered it.
I
I
did.
Yeah, I mean, there's anyone who thinks that the United States can kind of reshore productivity and come back to a state that it was decades ago is really just pretending. So that part of it, it's clear. A lot of the systems have just been broken down culturally. We've been broken down. We've been pulled apart. So it does feel very much like, at least in the near future, the inevitable is that we're going into a dark age. So what does that mean for those of us who will live through that? And is there any way at this stage to kind of protect or prepare for what's to come?
Yeah, moved somewhere safe.
Is there such a place as somewhere safe?
Well, it depends on your age. How old are you?
I'm 53.
Okay, I'm 79. I don't need to be safe 15 years from now because I'm not going to be here. So
Mhm.
I would like to be somewhere where there's food and reasonable temperatures and people who are not insane for the next few years. Okay, you on the other hand have got 20 or 30 years ahead of you. And we've talked about this before the show where you've moved to a lot of places. There are going to be good places to be, but the best analogy that I can give, I came to France the first time in 1969. I took 30 days leave. I was stationed in Vietnam and I went all over Europe. The first place that I went to was France, and they were still riding around in Paris on bicycles. It was 24 years after the end of World War II, and you
Yeah.
could still see the effect from an economic point of view. And then in 1980, I bought an airplane for a guy and brought it to England, and he was rebuilding a farmhouse in Biarritz, and we flew his family to Biarritz, and we drove down to Spain. And the amazing thing about Spain was that was 34 years after the end of the Spanish Civil War, and there hadn't been a new building built in Spain. Everybody was living in poverty.
Yeah.
Wars destroy economies. Every empire has crashed when they start getting involved in military adventurism. It happened to the Spanish. Spanish were rich from 1522 until about 1810. And then the people in South America said, okay, we don't need Spain to rule us. So you had Simon Bolivar and you had revolutions all over South America. Uh, I believe that 15 or 20 years from now, Europe is going to be kind of a Disneyland for the Chinese and the Russians and the Indians because they have real values and they have a real financial system and they're going to succeed. The balance of power is shifting from the West to the East, and for people in the West who are aware of it, you've got a tremendous opportunity to make changes. If you're not aware of it, if you don't educate yourself, you're going to be like Spain was in 1980.
Yeah.
It is both an opportunity and a threat at exactly the same time. I have a good friend who went to Russia, and he talks to me on a regular basis, and I'm absolutely amazed. Relatively low inflation, cheap food, real moral values, none of this woke nonsense where people. Let me give you a perfect example of something that shows the end of empire. When the judge was running for the Supreme Court and she was in charge of the Senate for confirmation, and she was asked, what is a woman? How did she respond?
She said, I can't tell you because I'm not a biologist.
Exactly. Now, I was a Marine fighter pilot. I can tell you, and I'm not a biologist. But when you've got a Supreme Court justices who cannot answer a question as simple as that, you are at end of empire.
Yeah.
And while I was certainly not a fan of Joe Biden, I look at some of the insanity of Donald Trump. The funny thing is, were you aware the Norwegians, if you're going to run for uh, the Nobel Peace Prize or be recommended for the Nobel Peace Prize, they end the nominations on January 31st. Now, President Obama was inaugurated on January 20th as president. So there were 11 days between when he was inaugurated and when the Nobel Prize had the shut off date
Yeah.
for
What a joke.
recommendations. Okay.
Yeah.
And they gave him the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, why did they give Obama the Peace Prize when he had only been in office for 11 days?
I think I could keep the country out of war if I only had to be president for 11 days.
Well, to be fair, you should make it at least 12 days. I mean, it should be longer than 11 days. But basically, if Donald Trump wanted the Nobel Peace Prize, he should stay out of war for at least 12 days. And the problem is, since he's been inaugurated, he can't stay out of war. He's got to start a new war. We got a new one today against Russia and more sanctions. They're going to destroy Europe. What a great idea.
Yeah. Well, so this brings me back to the idea of, moving somewhere safe, because this is an idea that we have tossed around a lot over the last year. We sold our home in South Texas. We thought about moving to Mexico, to other places in Latin America, to South Africa. I mean, we really thought through, is there a place that we could go that would be better than being here? But there are things like technocracy and artificial intelligence and digital IDs and all of these things, which are basically creating this global surveillance state. So where you live physically doesn't necessarily opt you out of the global tyranny. What are your thoughts on that?
Why is November 2nd a day that marks the start of something really bad happening in the United States?
November 2nd. You tell me.
Food stamps.
What happens with food stamps on November 2nd?
Nothing. That's why it's so critical. The
Tell me.
financial system of the government is paralyzed. Okay. And the federal government has already notified the states that the SNAP program, that's a supplemental
Yeah.
S, and it's food stamps.
Nutrition
Okay.
assistance program. Mhm.
Yeah. There are food stamps that are supposed to be paid on November 1st, and they're not going to get paid.
Right.
So what happens on November 2nd?
Yeah, a lot of pain, a lot of
No, no,
chaos.
no. You get 40 million pissed off people
Yeah.
who are counting on the United States government feeding them. Now, could that be a catastrophe unlike anything Americans have ever been through?
Mhm.
Yeah. What's that? 10 days away. We are run by idiots. Okay, I accept the fact they're sociopaths.
Mhm.
If you're going to run for government anywhere in the world, it is a primary requirement that you be a sociopath. You
Yeah.
have to do anything to gain power. So, everybody, every government in the world, I am an equal opportunity anarchist. I despise all governments equally because they're all
Mhm.
sociopaths. However, there is something more dangerous than a sociopath, and that is a sociopath who is brain dead. Okay. If Congress cannot see what's going to happen when 40 million people don't get their food stamps, stick around for 2 weeks and I'll show you. We're dealing with brain dead idiots who would destroy the United States rather than give an inch to the Democrats or to the Republicans. We have this divide now that's
Yeah.
totally insane. And I've been predicting something between a revolution and a civil war. And the food stamps, okay, do not go to a food store on November 2nd. Buy all your food in October. Okay. If you're going to go anywhere shopping on November 2nd, go to the hardware store and pick up some extra ammo.
Yeah. Wow. Well, interesting times, certainly.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. That hadn't occurred to you, had it?
It has occurred to me, but the November 2nd deadline had not. So now you just put a little extra pressure on us. Thanks very much.
Exactly.
While you live in the vineyards of south of France, good for you.
I
Well,
am not as stupid as I look.
Yeah, you don't at all. And obviously, your insights are much valued to us and our audience. So we're really, really grateful. I'm going to let you go this time, but I really hope that we can continue this conversation very soon because there's obviously a lot happening and a lot to be watching. And we would love to hear your continued thoughts on it. Any final thoughts or words for our audience before we let you go?
Okay, you have raised an issue that I think is very important, and I would like to comment on it. And
Yeah.
essentially, you're saying, hey, we're not sure of where we should be or what we should do. The internet gives people an incredible opportunity. Clearly, the state of Israel is deliberately taking over TikTok, Paramount, uh, CBS News. They want to control the narrative. Now,
Mhm.
they're not going to succeed, they're going to fail. But they've raised an important issue, and that issue is that you can educate yourself if you choose. People have access to more information today than they ever have been before, but you got to pick and choose your sources. I would never trust TikTok again. Frankly, I wouldn't even trust Twitter or X because
Correct.
clearly Elon has gone to the dark side. But your site and 100 other sites that are trying to educate people, I'm not saying we're right, but we have ideas that people should certainly think about and they should educate themselves, and they can do it for free, and
Yeah.
it would be total insanity not to. 100% of what the government tells you and the mainstream media tells you is a lie. And it is incumbent on everyone to try to determine what the reality is, because literally your lives, your fortunes, your children, and your grandchildren's fortune depend on it. We're going through the biggest transition in 500 years, and 95% of people are totally oblivious to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Un- Undeniably. I think another really great source of information is your books. So, can you help people find your books, your website, how they can follow along, and how they can support your work?
How much do you know about Asperger's?
Asperger's. I've heard about it.
Okay, it is a blessing and a curse at the same time. I flew every military mission that you could fly except dropping nuclear weapons. I could have written the definitive book about aviation in Vietnam in the
Mhm.
1970s, but I have Asperger's and I can't spell. If I had to type an entire page without the use of a spell checker or anyone helping me, and I gave it to you and you read it, you'd think, I thought Bob was smart. He's not smart. He's really stupid. Okay. He can't speak. He can't spell simple words. So I tried writing back in the 1970s and sent off to agents and sent off to publishing houses. All of them came back, said, "Oh, your writing is really interesting. Send it to us when it's spelled correctly." And I thought about it. I thought, wait a minute. Do these guys want a writer or do they want a speller? Because I'm a good writer. I'm just not a good speller. But I can read 1,500 words a minute. So the downside is I can't spell, but the upside is, but I can consume a lot of words.
Mhm.
And I've read probably 150 or 180,000 books.
Wow.
So I can write fiction, I can write nonfiction, I can write autobiography. I can write about financial stuff. And I've got 10 or 12 books on Amazon and on Lulu, and they're good books. I have written short fiction. I've written financial books. I've written books on war. I've written an autobiography, and they're all good reading. Okay, if all you do is read the reviews, you realize it's pretty good reading. And I have deliberately made the books as cheap as possible, so everyone has access to them. And frankly, they're good books. I've read a lot of bad books, so I know what a good book reads like.
They are good books. They're on Amazon and Lulu. And then you also have your website, 321gold.com, correct?
Correct.
Right. Well, Bob, I am a good speller. It's one of my few talents. So if you ever want to team up and get a couple more books out, I'd be very happy to support you on that.
Well, it's very kind of you to say. When Apple came out with the Macintosh computer, uh, and it had a spell checker, I realized I had died and gone to heaven.
Well, good. So, Bob, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, and I really hope we can do it again soon.
I hope so. I hope we're still around.
Yes, absolutely. We'll pray for that. Thanks so much.
Go shopping early.
Will do for sure. Thank you so much. And to everyone who is watching and listening, thank you for spending your time with us. If you would like to dive deeper into our work, you can visit us at collapselife.com, where you'll see all our interviews, our articles, and all our weekly roundups. If you want to help us keep doing this kind of independent work and keep bringing on guests like Bob Moriarty, please consider becoming a paid subscriber on Substack or supporting us through Buy Me a Coffee. We would really appreciate every bit of support, and we're so grateful. We will be back next week. We hope to see you again then. And until then, just remember, keep your chin up. It's only collapse. See you soon.